In the vast, starlit history of Arda, few figures are as enigmatic or as beloved as the old man in the tall, pointed blue hat and long gray cloak who first appeared to a quiet hobbit at the door of Bag End. Welcome to Echoes of Middle-earth, where today we are venturing into the deepest mysteries of the Third Age to answer one of the most vital questions in all of legend. Why were Gandalf's powers restricted? To the unsuspecting inhabitants of the Shire, he was merely a wandering wizard who provided magical diamond studs to the old Took and created fireworks that looked like laburnums of fire. Yet, beneath the guise of an old man who was shorter than his peers and leaned upon a thorny staff, there dwelt a lord of great reverence and ancient dignity. To understand why this being of semi-divine origin was forced to wander as a pilgrim, enduring cold, hunger, and the mockery of kings, we must look back to the very arrival of the Order of Wizards in Middle-earth. The beings we know as wizards were not born as old men, nor were they of the race of men at all. They were the Istari, members of the Order of the Ainur, primordial spirits created by the thought of the One before the world itself was fashioned. Gandalf, known in his youth in the West as Olorin, was the wisest of these spirits. He had spent uncounted ages in the gardens of Lorien and the House of Niana, where he learned the profound lessons of pity and patience. When the first shadow fell upon Greenwood the Great around the year 1000 of the Third Age, the Valar, the powers of the world, resolved to send messengers to Middle-earth to contest the growing power of Sauron. However, the Valar had learned from the cataclysms of the past that matching the Dark Lord with overwhelming force often resulted in the shattering of the very lands they sought to protect. Thus, the Istari were sent under a strict and divine mandate. They were forbidden to match Sauron's power with power. This fundamental restriction was not a suggestion, but a core condition of their mission. They were explicitly prohibited from seeking to dominate elves or men by force or fear. Their task was to move the hearts of the children of Iluvatar to valiant deeds, and to unite those who had the will to resist the darkness. To ensure they remained true to this purpose, they were commanded to take the shape of men, real, physical bodies that were never young and aged only slowly. This incarnation was the first and most physical restriction on Gandalf's power. By inhabiting a human form, he became subject to all the fears, pains, and weariness of the earth. He felt the bite of the north wind on the high passes of the mountains, and knew the gnawing ache of hunger on a long road. Though his spirit was immortal, his body was the stuff of earth and could be destroyed by a spear thrust or the fiery whip of a demon. Furthermore, this physical state clouded the memories of his true origins. While he possessed great wisdom, the fullness of his ancient lore was often veiled by the weariness of his labors. He was a pilgrim on the road, a back that bent beneath its load, and a weary pilgrim who had to search through hoarded scrolls and books in Minas Tirith to find the truth about the One Ring. This process of discovery was slow and required years of dark journeys and long search, illustrating that he did not possess all-seeing knowledge. He was even forced to admit that he had been lulled by the words of Saruman the Wise, and was at fault for not seeking the truth sooner. Such a failure would have been impossible for a spirit in its unclouded state, but as a restricted Istari, Gandalf was capable of error and doubt.
The restriction on using force meant that Gandalf's greatest weapons were not spells of destruction, but counsel and the rekindling of hope. To aid him in this, he was secretly entrusted with Narya, the Ring of Fire, by Círdan the Shipwright. Círdan, who saw further and deeper than any other, recognized that Gandalf's labors would be heavy, and that his true power must be the ability to rekindle hearts in a world that grows chill. This ring supported him in his weariness and allowed him to remain a burning brand in the face of despair. We see this power at work during the Siege of Gondor, where his very presence caused men's hearts to lift and the winged shadows of the Nazgul to pass from their memory. He was a trumpet voice that called the free folk to stand unconquered for a little while. His refusal to wield absolute power was tested most severely when he was offered the One Ring. Even though he had the spiritual stature to take it, he cried out in anguish, "Do not tempt me." He understood that the way of the ring to his heart was through pity for weakness and the desire to do good. As a restricted messenger, he knew that if he attempted to use the ring to overthrow Sauron, the desire for mastery would corrupt him, and he would eventually set himself upon the Dark Throne as a new, perhaps more terrible Dark Lord. This insight was what Saruman lacked. Saruman, the chief of the Order, eventually viewed the mission of the Istari with scorn, mocking Radagast as a fool and seeking to become a power himself. Saruman believed that the white light can be broken and sought the knowledge, rule, order of a tyrant, directly violating the restrictions of the Valar.
Gandalf's adherence to these restrictions is perhaps most evident in his dealings with the rulers of men. Though he was a lord of dignity, he was often treated as a messenger of woe or a stormcrow by those whose minds were poisoned by pride or deceit. When he came to the halls of Theoden, he was required to leave his staff at the door, for the king's doorward correctly suspected that the staff in the hand of a wizard may be more than a prop for age. Gandalf submitted to these local laws, even if he grumbled that a king will have his way in his own hall. Similarly, in the presence of Denethor, the steward of Gondor, Gandalf was often viewed as a rival or a grey fool. Denethor, who had grown old before his time by wrestling with the will of Sauron through a palantir, resented Gandalf's influence and feared that the wizard sought to rule in his stead. Gandalf, bound by his restrictions, could only reply that the rule of no realm is mine, for his care was for all worthy things that are in peril. Even his use of magic was often understated and localized, designed to assist rather than to win the war single-handedly. He had made a special study of bewitchments with fire and lights, which he used to rescue the dwarves from the Great Goblin and to hold off the wargs in the wilderness. When he did exert his full strength, as he did during the duel with the Balrog upon the peak of Zirig-Zigil, it was a battle between two ancient entities of shadow and flame, and the strain of such an encounter caused his old life to burn away. He was naked and sent back only for a brief time to finish his appointed task. This resurrection as Gandalf the White saw a shift in his authority, yet the restrictions on his use of force remained. He was Saruman as he should have been, possessing the power to break Saruman's staff and command the respect of the lords of men. Yet he still functioned as the mover of all that has been accomplished, rather than a conqueror. The necessity of these restrictions becomes clear when we look at the ultimate goal of the war. If Gandalf had used his full power to storm the Dark Tower, it would not have achieved the final end of this menace. The victory had to be won by the weak when the wise falter. This was the fool's hope upon which the strategy of the West was built. The belief that the ring-bearer could succeed precisely because he was a witless halfling, whom the Dark Lord would never suspect of attempting to destroy the source of his power. By acting as a guide and a counselor, Gandalf allowed the small hands of the hobbits to move the wheels of the world, while the eyes of the great were turned elsewhere. His role was to be the bait at the Black Gate, drawing the eye of Sauron out from his own land so that Frodo could reach the cracks of doom. Ultimately, Gandalf's restricted power was a sign of his unwavering faithfulness to the will of the Creator. He was a steward, not a king, and he understood that the Third Age was my age, and that his work would be finished once the shadow was removed. He refused to be the master of the ring, choosing instead to remain a pilgrim whose footsteps were heard on the hill in the gray evening, and who departed before the dawn. In the end, it was his restraint and his willingness to empower others that led to the dawn of a new age, the dominion of men, where the white tree could be renewed in the high places. As the last ships sailed from the Grey Havens and the Third Age passed into the realm of song and memory, the echoes of Gandalf's deeds remained. He had been a pilgrim on the road who had seen 3 full ages of the world, yet he never once claimed it as his own. He was the only one of the Istari who remained entirely faithful to the mandate of the West, proving that true strength lies not in the ability to dominate, but in the wisdom to know when to hold one's hand. He left the world as a white light that had guided the people of Middle-earth through their darkest night, returning at last to the shores of the sea, where his long labors could finally find rest. Thank you for exploring this chapter of the Legends of Arda with us here on Echoes of Middle-earth. If you want to continue uncovering the hidden truths of the wise and the brave, make sure to like and subscribe as we journey deeper into the ancient lore of Tolkien's magnificent world. Until the stars shine again upon our meeting, may your path be clear and your heart stay true to the light that never fades.